So welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We're talking about information governance and enterprise AI adoption. If you are new here and we haven't met before, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP of Strategic Solutions at Valora Technologies, and joining me is Sandy Surkis, who is co-founder and CEO of Valora, and we're very happy to have you this afternoon, so thanks for joining us. You are here in our 2025 webinar series. If you've missed anything in the past, I'd encourage you to go online at valoratech.com, and all of these webinars are available on demand. And we've got 3 more coming up for the rest of the year, so I'd encourage you to hop on and register for those. We'd love to have you. A little bit about Valora if you are new here and you don't know about what we do. Newsflash, we're celebrating 25 years this year in business. What we do is we offer an information governance platform that leverages auto classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate the classification and the defensible disposition of content, regardless of where it lives across the enterprise, and quite often used by IG teams, records teams, compliance teams, IT teams to defensively govern their data and bring kind of multiple repositories together into a single pane of glass. And not only do we help kind of bringing the multiple repositories into a single view, but we help with aligning multiple use cases. Because it used to be that information governance was synonymous with records management, and it was really a focus on the management and destruction of corporate records. Whereas we know the reality is really all corporate data, not just records, needs to be identified and managed, everything from e-discovery to legal hold to privacy and to AI readiness, which we're talking about today. So that's really what Valora brings to the table, is not only a single pane of glass for all repositories and content, but the ability to defensively manage data in one spot. So that's a little bit about us. A little bit about you joining us today. Thank you very much for filling out those the little questionnaires when you register. It's really helpful to know who's around the table. So around the table today, the virtual table, is lots of folks in records and IM and compliance, and some in everywhere else. So welcome, we're happy to have you. And we always ask, what's on your mind? What's bugging you right now? And right now, usually it is a lot of file cleanup and rot reduction. We're seeing a lot more people interested in AI readiness, so you're in good company today. And as always, the OMG everything. So again, you come to the right place, and we're happy to help on all these things. For today's webinar, just some housekeeping before we get started. I can see the Q&A, so Sandy and I will kind of flip back and forth, but please feel free to ask your questions as we go. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to interrupt us, and we'll interrupt each other, and we can answer those questions as we go. As I mentioned, we will be sending a recording of this webinar, so stay tuned for that, and a copy of the slides, because as you'll see as we go through the slides, there's some helpful links in there that will send you to different places, so that'll be helpful. And of course, box number 4, we would love your feedback. That helps drive what we talk about in our webinars and how we approach those different topics, so we would love your feedback at any time, here or afterwards. So in saying all that, our agenda today, we are again talking about IG and enterprise AI adoption. So what we're going to be talking about is what even is AI and how are most organizations using it right now? What are the risks perhaps that may be exposed when using AI in organizations? How to think about AI readiness and AI governance, and also how not to. How to stand up an AI governance program in your organization, and using AI to perform and enhance data governance, the things that you're already doing under your information governance purview. So that's our agenda today. We've got lots of stuff to cover. We're pretty excited about it. So, so welcome, and we'll get into it. So let's start here. Sandy, you let me know if you want to take this, but kind of like, what even is AI? When we say AI, because it's just in news all the time, usually we're talking about generative AI, but AI is weird. It's not new. It's been around for decades. And really, the definition of artificial intelligence is referring to something that is replacing human activities or human intelligence. So learning, reasoning, and self-correction. And the early use cases, if you've ever, on your Windows in, 95, if you've you played chess or something like that, you have interacted in the 90s with AI. But of course, it has evolved since then. And now we're talking about ChatGPT and neural networks and kind of that interactive search and retrieval of information that seems pretty magical. Sandy, you just let me know when you just want to pick it up.
Yeah, no, you keep going. I'll jump in
here. So our different types of AI, so that we're kind of all singing off the same song sheet, there are different types of artificial intelligence, and we'll go through those right now. The first is machine learning, and these are computer algorithms that enable systems to learn from things that have already happened and make predictions based on data. So these are machine algorithms, just kind of learning, but I use that term loosely. In an extractive AI, these are algorithms that will go out and extract specific information from extremely large data sets. And that's very useful for if you're looking for, predictive analytics and things like that. It will take all of the past history, extract that, and then use it for something. Generative AI, that's what we're talking about in the news right now. This is an AI algorithm that generates, that's why it's called generative, generates new content based on the data that it has been trained on. So in the cases of, early ChatGPT, it was the web. In a case of, if you're applying a generative AI in your own business, it could be your data that is used for those data sets. So that's generative AI. It's a bit different beast. Also a different beast is agentic AI, and that's kind of the newest form of AI that we're talking about now. And that is AI that operates independently and seems to be making decisions and performing tasks without human intervention. So, I'm looking up tickets for an air flight. Oh, would you like me to go ahead and book that for you? That's a different kind of agentic AI example. So that's kind of what we're talking, when we're talking about AI, these are kind of the four buckets. And again, we're talking generative AI and agentic AI in mostly in today's discussion. But interesting to note, and also interesting to call out and important to call out, is the fantasy versus reality of generative AI. So the reality is it is trained on data sets. So it is generating content from the information that it has previously ingested. Fantasy is that it is not a magical search engine. It seems like it, like when you're typing something into Google and Gemini is, oh, how about this? It seems like it knows what it's talking about, but it's creating that new content based on learned patterns and algorithms. It is not magic. It is computer algorithms. The third bucket there is hallucinations, and this is a reality of a fantasy, I guess you could say that, where it tries to give you the best guess. And if it doesn't know, it's going to start making some stuff up. And you can see, if you've played around with ChatGPT or other Gen AI algorithms, you'll kind of see that happening where you're like, I don't think so. It doesn't fact check, and it's relying on a human to fact check in those instances. And then the fourth bucket there, a real reality is it's not up to date. It is only as accurate as the last run of its source data. So if it's lagging behind 2 weeks, a month, 2 days, and you're asking it something that happened recently, it's not going to know because it's only as effective as the data that it's run on.
Okay, so maybe I will jump in here.
Sure.
Because as Jen said, the two bottom ones that are not in the orange boundary, those are the newer forms of AI, and those are the ones that are really hot and exciting right now. But they are the ones that carry a lot of risk and a lot of concerns, and it's important to understand the distinction. So the top two, machine learning and extractive AI, which are in the orange boundary, those are defensible. So what do we mean by that? machine learning, Jen didn't use this word, but I'll chuck it out there, is usually based on probabilistic algorithms, often called Bayesian algorithms. And so what that means is that you can follow the train of thought literally because it is the instruction set that the AI algorithm uses. So that's what makes it defensible. In other words, let's just say we're classifying a document. Why would we be doing that, Sandy? And saying, all right, we've determined that this is an offer letter to a potential employee. And so what you have with machine learning is essentially a decision tree that says, well, this document contained words like offer letter and start date and hiring manager, and it had enough kind of words that would suggest an employee offer letter, and we have this, degree of confidence. You can literally follow the math and follow the rules logic all the way down, and therefore this is the best choice, the most probabilistic answer. So that is how machine learning works, and because it works that way, it is defensible. It means it will always produce the same result every time. It means you can follow the decisioning, and it means you can program the decisioning. You can change things so that, if it's this confidence, I want you to go over here. And if it's 50-50, I want you to do this. And if it's 70-30, I want you to do that, 80-20. You can literally program that so that you get those repeatable results every time. Extractive AI, similarly, is pulling data from a truth set, from something that exists, so very verifiable and repeatable. It will be consistent in what it does. So it's important to understand that those two technologies are defensible and do not run a lot of the risks that we're going to talk about in the rest of this conversation. So before we move on, we'll just quickly check. Is there anyone that has questions about the kind of the safety line, what's happening on the sort of safe side of the safety line, and what's happening, well, we're going to get into what's happening on the less safe side, or the side that requires a lot more guardrails. I'll just stop for a second and see if there are any questions. I don't think I see any.
Yeah,
I can see the
new
Q&A.
questions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but please feel free to ask as we go along, and we'll get to those as we go.
Okay, so we can. All right. And we're on to me. Okay. All right. So now that we know we're perfectly, literate in what AI is and is not, how are most organizations using AI right now? So the kind of scary truth is that AI usage is not very well governed. Most people are experimenting. They're throwing something out to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and seeing what they get back. And so they are using what is essentially models that have been trained on kind of available scraped web data. And so the results are showing that when it comes back. Some organizations are just starting to have their own trained models on their own data, but again, a little bit kind of free range, not a whole lot of attention yet is being paid to what is the source of this? Where did this come from? Is this legitimate? Do we have a right to use this? Do we have permission to use this? And is it even accurate? So that's what we mean by kind of ungoverned experimentation. There's also a bunch of ungoverned usage, meaning, non-approved tools. People are just, uploading junk onto the internet to get at whatever it is they need to get at, or their apps that they're using, cloud-based apps, phone-based apps, are suddenly having AI tools built in. So they're like, oh, cool, I'll just start using that. Not all of that has been vetted. There aren't really guardrails in place, and it's very easy to get caught into, or tricked even, into accidentally disclosing enterprise information. All of that said, the general usage patterns so far are relatively lightweight and aren't quite as dangerous as they're going to get in the next probably 12 to 18 months. Most usage patterns are around search and retrieval. Search is the #1 use for AI, which is find me the answer to blah. We are starting to see people using AI on a regular basis to create content. Full disclosure, 1 or 2 slides in here were created by AI on purpose for us to see, kind of what is the state of the art and how can we use this in what we do every day. So for example, the quote on the left, which comes from that McKinsey report, which, by the way, I highly recommend you read. It was excellent. AI found that report for me, and I, the human, went and validated that it was a real report. It was really published by McKinsey, et cetera, et cetera. So this is legit, but there was an AI kind of content creation as far as we are concerned in the creation of this slide here. The other thing that we're just starting to see AI being used for is analysis and forecasting. And again, all the caveats that would go with when you're making a forecast that is based essentially only on past behavior. Is past behavior a good indicator of future performance? That holy war has been raging for many, many decades. AI doesn't change that. It just makes it easier to have that assumption. And there are some emerging usage patterns. Jen already mentioned agentic AI, which is where the AI is going one step further and taking actions on behalf of the user or the organization, and kind of anticipating your use. I thought you might need this, or we've just had a discussion on this. I went ahead and built a project plan. Here it is. That kind of thing, that go one more step.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Sandy, there is an interesting, on this McKinsey study, interesting that one of the stats was employees using Gen AI for a third or more of their day-to-day work, which is double what the leaders think that they're using it for. So that was lots of interesting stats in that study.
Yeah, and that study is from January. So on the one hand, that's relatively recent to today. On the other hand, you're like, oh, 5 months ago.
Yeah, 5 months ago. God, the world has changed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if anything, I would think that the issues and the things that they've highlighted are only more so today. So that takes us to what are the top uses? You guys probably know this already. Knowledge management. Thank you. Oh, thank you for commentary. Very much appreciated, Darcy. Using it for search optimization. Jen, you can kind of click through some of these. Using it for customer support. We've all used, questionably valuable chatbots. And obviously, near and dear to Valora's heart is using it for data classification. We're going to talk about that at the end of this webinar. Lots of people using this for content generation and therefore boosting productivity. You can get more done with less. And increasingly so, AI augmented decision making using Gen AI or machine learning to guide research, to guide forecasts, to guide clinical trials, etc. So these are the top uses so far. Would love to hear from some of you. If you guys are using AI in your organization, you don't see yourself represented, please do drop something into the chat and let us know how your organization is using AI. And if you want to, whether you're comfortable with that use or not comfortable with that use. Okay, so AI is doing all this formerly employee work. It's doing it faster. It's able to. It has kind of complete knowledge in a way that a single employee may or may not. The employee has judgment. AI has rules and scoring. Is it any good? Believe it or not, yes, it's fabulously good. I'm not trying to frighten anyone. I hope none of you are at risk of losing your jobs, but this is ChatGPT-4, which OpenAI is already well past GPT-4. But I loved this quote, and this was from that McKinsey study, can so easily pass the bar exam that it would rank in the top 10%. Okay, can answer 90% of the questions to become a doctor. So it's both doctor and lawyer. My mother would love it. And so basically, yes, AI is going to beat or best humans on things that we often find tedious or complex or require a lot of mental skill, like processing, analysis, math, having to be aware of 47 different variables, and things that require high volume. It needs to run all day, all night. Humans don't have that kind of endurance. So this is where AI is really going to shine. That said, it is not just, a walk in the park. There are a lot of risks. And I chose this picture on purpose, having raised two toddlers. And we are at the toddler stage of AI adoption. For anyone who has not been around a toddler, what that means is that you're in perpetual, kind of oversight mode. Oh my God, oh my God. Because at any given moment, the toddler can stick their finger in the outlet. And we are the new parents or the responsible parties for this toddler. And it is definitely time to baby-proof the house. We're going to keep using this toddler metaphor for a bit because it's very appropriate, as you will see. So we've tried to outline exactly what the risks are for you and then put it back into the toddler metaphor. So the first one up is, of course, data leakage. That is where the employee is just trying to do their job, and they're used to ChatGPT. It's very helpful, or they're using some sort of software, maybe third-party software that has it built in. Use the AI helper. Yes. And they're accidentally not realizing that they're leaking information out of the organization. It used to be email was our biggest kind of open door. People would send attachments. Well, it has been surpassed by kind of AI as our biggest open door. So employees are accidentally or not realizing the ramifications of posting sensitive data, trade secrets. I'll give you an example of how easy that is to happen. Let's say you're a hiring manager, you've crafted a job description, and you're wondering what the kind of going rate for that project manager level 4 is. So you take your well-crafted job description and you post it out there to ChatGPT and say, what would be the salary range in my area of the country for this kind of role? Well, what you did was just post your job post without realizing that you've done so. So you've now opened yourself up. Maybe you mentioned in the job post, our company is the market leader in blah, 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 blah. You have now identified that that is a job post, a potential job post for your organization. And you've just, every headhunter is now going to contact you or worse. And again, it was just very innocently putting that out there. And that is our metaphor. The toddler has found the medicine cabinet. Oh my God. Next one up is shadow AI. And basically, shadow AI is, again, often with the best of intent, is employees, users are engaging in shadow AI that are unauthorized tools. Just because AI shows up in an app or shows up on your phone does not mean it's been authorized or even vetted by your IT or your InfoSec group. But most people don't understand that. They've come to trust, well, if the software gives me a tool, it must be okay. And that is definitely not universally true. And so this is where, again, as InfoGov folks, you can start to play a role, start asking those questions. What tools are you using? Where did that tool come from? Who vetted that tool? Mostly you'll get blank stares back. And so we have kind of, to continue our metaphor, the toddler's trying to use the stove, which would not normally be allowed when no one's watching. And the toddler just thinks, ooh, pretty knobs, not realizing they could set the house on fire. So that takes us into number 3, which is policy and procedural violations and circumventions. It's tough enough getting employees to understand that there are governance rules to data, that, is this a record? How should it be treated? Where should it be kept? Who should you be disclosing this to? And AI itself just generates volumes and volumes of content, almost universally unclassified. So it's creating more clutter, more rot, more information that is potentially questionable. And it's very easy to kind of skip the guardrails if you either don't know, or the worst case, there's we'll give the employee the benefit of the doubt where they just didn't know or they didn't realize, or then there's the bad actor, right? That it's very easy to circumvent guardrails. We'll talk about some of those in a minute, but the bad actor can pretty easily navigate around the typical AI guardrails.
Mm-hmm. And Sandy Clifton just comments here in the chat, it's not just job descriptions and company info, but AI resume writing can also indirectly release PII.
Absolutely. A great example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. And there was another question. Yes, this deck will be shared. Yes. Okay. So moving along to, and wait, there's more risks.
But wait, there's more.
You also get, right. So we talked about hallucinations, obviously, misinformation, and why is that a problem? Sometimes they're just humorous, like if you're looking for an AI recipe and it tells you to cook the casserole for 10 minutes at 14,000 degrees. That's funny, haha, but it's not funny if it's giving advice about how to perform a surgical procedure and it's pulling the same kind of hallucination. Or I assume we've all heard about the recent court cases, one of them involving Anthropic, in which the legal citations that they used were hallucinated by the AI. Not the position you want to get in court. So, and in this, just like a toddler who says, I'm 30 when they're 3, they're confident, they like that, they're mimicking their parents, but they are flat out wrong. That is a very common scenario with AI. And if you don't know the difference yourself, it can be very, very hard to spot, or you don't bother doing the checking, then you can get really, really caught in either a regulatory setting or a court setting, or God forbid, with a customer. You really don't want to get in that situation where you have to defend something that is indefensible. So then we head over to again, another known risk is unclear accountability. AI can just create or modify content, but who counts as the author? Who counts as the custodian of that? What is the chain of custody? If I have asked AI to create a press release on behalf of my company, am I the author? Or is AI the author? Or is the organization the author? Or is, if I used Claude, is Anthropic the author? So unclear who is the owner, what happens in a legal proceeding settings, who's the custodian, what constitutes, if I need to put a custodian under legal hold, who am I putting under legal hold? This is what we mean about non-curated data. We're going to come back to this whole notion of curating your data. Spoiler alert, that is a solution that we're going to be talking about today. But you can, if you to follow along in our toddler metaphor, who gave the toddler scissors? What were you thinking? Same idea. And then again, another well-known drawback, another problem is, of course, bias and discrimination. So most AI LLMs have been trained on the data that exists or the data that was easy to get, which was screen scraped web data. And sadly, a lot of that is misogynistic, it's hateful, it's racist, et cetera, et cetera. So the training models have had that built in. It's very difficult to what we call unbake the cake. If you used spoiled milk in your cake batter and you go bake the cake, there's nothing you can do to get that spoiled milk taste out of your cake. And that is the same problem here. It's very hard to surgically extract out the racism or the bias. Generally, the better approach is to clean your data, remove bias, and retrain from the start because it's so hard to undo. But that's a very helpful metaphor if you need to discuss this with people. And so the first downside is that the results are kind of influenced by these negative aspects. The second order is, of course, that sets you up for potential problems, right? You could be violating policies, you could be violating regulations, you could be outright performing something illegal, again, with the best of intentions and even unaware that your model is biased. And so in here, the toddler is simply mimicking bad behavior. If the parent is on a drunken rage cursing, what do you think the toddler is going to pick up next time grandma is visiting? So same thing. Again, we find the toddler metaphor to be very, very helpful. And that takes us to a new risk, which I'm not sure if all of you have heard of. This has become a new obsession of mine, and that is AI model collapse. So so again, I have the toddler here with the blocks crashing down all over her. No toddlers were actually harmed in the making of this slide. And what is happening is that the AI models are collapsing. What does that mean? It occurs when the AI model trains on its own output. So that's why we have this little snake eating its tail. So the AI, the generative AI creates content, then it trains itself on its content, then it creates content, and it is recursively getting more and more kind of tunnel vision in a way. And so what actually happens there, that's, by the way, that's called synthetic data. When AI is creating data, that's called synthetic data, as opposed to human. The earliest versions of data that AI were trained on were, of course, human generated data. And so synthetic data kind of mimics real world. It's AI created data based on what is most likely the next word in sequence. And so what happens is that basically the AI, when it's recursive like this, it's doing a couple of things. It's cutting off infrequent or improbable circumstances, which you might know as black swans. It's kind of cutting them out of the description, and it is overemphasizing the things that are frequent and common. So if you look, not to get too technical on you, but if you've ever watched a Valora webinar before, or if you know me, I like math. And what you have here are the extracts from a study that was published in Nature magazine. Again, a fascinating read. Highly recommend it. This is a link when you get the slides. But I will try and keep it very simple. Basically, what is happening is that probable or likely events are overestimated over time in the model, and that is like a snowball effect. It gets worse and worse. And unlikely or improbable events are underestimated or underaccounted for, and that gets worse and worse over time. So what that's called, and I love this phrasing, is that it's actually the LLM, the algorithm is actually poisoning itself, okay? And you can see that in the second chart. And what you're looking at there, generation 0, the light blue, that is the closest match to reality. It's the essentially the closest probabilistic response that matches reality. And it is the first one. And then they train, so it produces data, and then you run generation 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And by generation 9, take a look, that's the brown one, how far afield of reality that is. And this whole process, if you want to impress your friends and neighbors at a cocktail party, is called perplexity. And so you can see the perplexity degrading over time. And all there, so there's two interesting things. One, the perplexity degrades to the point where the output becomes garbage. So it's inaccurate, it's untrustworthy, and it is not defensible. So basically your data is junk. The other interesting thing, you see that long brown tail off to the right, is it's creating its own long tail of fantasy universe that has no correlation to reality at all. So it's inventing black swans that don't exist. So those are basically the hallucinations over there on the right. So this is AI model collapse explained in math. And on the next slide, I can give you an example of an AI model collapse disaster. We'll save that one for last on this slide. So just to summarize, what are all the risks? They are here on the left. Give you some real world examples of those risks in play and the implication of what that risk might likely mean to your organization. So now I will talk about, just because it's my new obsession, AI model collapse. And it reminds me of, I think a couple years ago, right before COVID, they were talking about the honeybees. They were collapsing because their ecosystems were being destroyed. It's very similar to that. But my favorite example of AI model collapse is Zillow. If you've ever used Zillow, if you're a homeowner, you've probably checked out your own home, and they will give you a Zestimate, which is their kind of AI-generated assessment of the market value of your home. And that is based on looking at data of other homes in your neighborhood and recent sales, and how many bedrooms do you have, et cetera. And so pre-COVID, from the years, I think it was 2017 or 2018 up through 2021, Zillow decided that they would use their Zestimate to their own advantage. So what they did, and they were not the only ones that did this, was they built an algorithm to compute this estimate. Okay, this is the value of this house, as well as what the likely sale price would be. And if there was essentially a spread there, then they would go into the arbitrage business. They would go ahead and purchase that home and then flip it. This is when home flipping was a big, big deal, and they got in on it. And the problem is that this was automated top to bottom. So the Zestimate value of the house, the sale price of the house, the actual selling of and purchasing of the house was almost entirely automated. And what the model failed to see, because it was built on its own data that Zillow had collected, so it was eating its own tail. And what it failed to see was that a pandemic had hit in 2020, 2021. Housing prices very, very depressed, nobody buying and selling. And they had gone out and purchased huge, something like 30% of certain markets that they could not then turn around and sell, and they were underwater. Ultimately, in 2021, they shut that down as a disaster and had a $500 million write-off. And so that was the most spectacular example of AI model collapse that I could find. Again, if you have heard of others, please share them with the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that takes us to, okay, Sandy, you've scared us. We understand there are some risks here. And by the way, all that to say, it doesn't mean don't ever use AI. It means use AI with your eyes open and build in safeguards. The same way we do for any new technology or any kind of capabilities, you have to be eyes open and aware of what the thing is and what the potential risks are. So now that we have that, let's talk about AI readiness, which is the phrase that we have kind of coined, we and others in this industry, to make our organizations ready for the arrival and the use of AI. And so, there are many, many different definitions for AI readiness. I chose one that I really liked from TechTarget and a little bit of what we ourselves use. And each of these areas on the right has to be assessed as part of AI readiness. Some of them are easy. If Jen, you go ahead. Oh, we'll click on through. You guys have heard these kind of pillars before. These are the same things that you would assess and evaluate for any new technology, AI, no different. But when we're specifically talking about AI, if you'll go on to the next slide, Jen, there are some of these that are easier than others, and I've checked those off. The technology, believe it or not, the technology is the easy part. You'll need computing resources, you'll need enough infrastructure, etc. Today, that's relatively cheap, relatively easy to turn on off in Azure, AWS, whatever you're using. The people, by and large, are available to you. You have data science folks, you have people who understand technology today. And the processes, we have more and more been documenting processes using things like SOC 2 or ISO 9001 to have processes that are ready for optimization. The tricky ones are the data. We're going to spend a little time on that one. The culture, in other words, understanding that, yes, I got it. We need to use AI, but we have got to have some governance in place. We can't just chuck it out there. And a strategy at all other than we need AI, go implement it, go. There has to be more to it than that. And I will leave those last two, culture and strategy, potentially for another webinar. I will invite you, for those of you that were at InfoNext in end of April, we covered that a lot. There's going to be a white paper coming forward. I'm one of the collaborating authors on that. And I would kind of encourage you when that is ready to read that. But what we're really going to spend some time on now is ensuring that your enterprise data is actually ready for AI. And so let's talk about data readiness. It should be obvious that AI and data go hand in hand. The AI needs data to learn, to be trained, to produce useful results. And no big surprise here, the better the data, the better the AI results. The worse the data, you know this as garbage in, garbage out, the worse the result. And if it is creating its own data, watch out for that model collapse. And I didn't mention this earlier. Why, given the potential for model collapse, why are people doing that at all? And the answer is because it's dirt cheap to do it. Okay? To have AI spew data all day long is relatively cheap and easy and doesn't even require a whole lot of resources to do. It's just mimicking what it's already seen. It's trivial. So one, it's cheap and easy. Two, it doesn't require permission from anybody. There's no such thing as authorship or copyright. It's just self-reinforcing. So it's almost irresistible from like the point of view of data science or IT to have the AI just generate it itself, no problems, right? Not so fast. But if you want your data to be meaningful, and more importantly, you want it to be meaningful over time, you're going to have to use your actual data that humans created once upon a time and that has been curated, okay? If you are still sitting on tons of rot, tons of duplicates, information that's past retention or prior versions, how is the AI ever going to know which version, which of these 17 versions of this contract is the right one to use? Which one has old information or information that was redacted out in a later version? How does it know that this employee has left the company when we're still maintaining that data long past the disposition, the retention date? And so now you start to see some of the ramifications of the, let's say, laissez-faire attitude about data retention that we as a society have kind of had over the past, I'll say 20, 25 years of becoming digital. We basically were like, meh, so we keep it, so it's a bit more of a search pain in the butt, it's a bit more storage, a bit more litigation expense, a bit more of a privacy slog, right? Like every time we pick up a new topic, this is what we say to ourselves. But now here's another one, which is AI is going to be that much crappier because it has junky data. And just so you know, there's a word for this, for junky AI output that AI is creating. Is called slop. So again, if you want to sound like you're in the know, it's called slop, like a pig would eat slop. That is AI generating kind of garbage, either content or results, slop. Okay, you can go ahead, Jen. So this basically takes us to the notion of auto-classification, because auto-classification is the tool that is going to get your enterprise data ready for AI. And now, Jen, I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah, so to get your data ready for that, running an auto-classification algorithm through your data helps exponentially. If you are new to auto-classification and to what that is, it's true auto-classification is the actual software algorithms performing the analysis on the data. So combining rich metadata and rules to auto-classify. So for every single piece of content in your entire organization, what is this? What is it? What do I do with it? And then does it. So whether that is, this is the first of 17 versions and this is the final, and this should be locked down, ignore LLM or ChatGPT, these last 17 versions, that's what auto-classification is going to help do. And it's going to search for file attributes or attributes of the content. So rather than looking at file metadata, which is last accessed or last modified, doesn't tell us anything about what's in that document. So what auto-classification does is go in and start to pull out those different data facets. So, is it about an employee? Is it about a contract? If we're talking about dates, is it, rather than last modified date of the file, who cares? Maybe it's an employment agreement. Maybe there's effective dates or signature dates or last expiration dates. So it's going to look for those file attributes that it will become rich metadata that the system will then use to provide and overlay recognition algorithms to say, oh, well, this is a service agreement, or this is a balance sheet, or these are, board meeting minutes. And then from there, it will apply disposition algorithms to say, if it is this, then do this with it. So if it's an employment contract, as an example, mark it as confidential, get it out of the file share, move it into, HR's SharePoint, retain it for whatever amount of time. And before we get rid of it, get someone's approval. And in the case of LLMs, do not use this person's employment contract. Do not use the data in here to train your LLMs. So applying those metadata tags to say, use this, don't use that, is extremely helpful in getting ready for pushing your data into an LLM. And then, of course, when it does something with it, maybe we need to redact it, maybe we need to hide it, maybe we need to move it, maybe we need to migrate it to a new system. Whatever that is, auto classification can help with that disposition of that. And a real world example of what it's kind of doing when it's looking and peering into a file is, this is often what you see when you look at a file share. Doesn't tell me anything about what's in this document. So what auto classification will do is open up that document and read it and start to pull out information. It's an informed consent form. This is a pharmaceutical document. This is about the drug. This is about the study. This is the investigator. This is the people. This is the date it was signed. So it's going to pull out all of that metadata and create this kind of rich metadata database to say, oh, this is the consent form. This is how we treat it. This is what we do. Do we include it in our data to train an LLM? Yes or no? So that's how it's going to learn and to understand and to allow, I'll say, content to be LLM trained. And it can do the same thing with structured data, because usually, of course, structured data is sitting in a database somewhere. So if you're trying as a human to say, well, what do we include to train and what do we not include? Auto classification is a great way to auto classify every single field, but then also to keep that unit together as a record. So kind of like, I use the term record loosely. I'm talking about database record to keep that information together. So when we're looking for, oh wait, this is employee data. Don't train the LLM on this, or this database is, product SKUs. We're okay to train the LLM on this. So having that ability to look at unstructured data and structured data and be able to kind of red light, green light what that LLM is going to be trained on is extremely useful. Sandy, do you want me to throw it back there? Oh, you know what? We've got a question, actually. Why don't I pause right here and Carolyn's asked a question. Is there any guidance or emerging best practices about what elements of AI should be deemed records? For example, prompts, generated content. What if it's consulted but not used, or rephrased and not used wholesale?
Yeah,
that's a great question.
I haven't heard of anything that is definitively, kind of put out by the industry, let's say by ARMA or by NIST or something like that. But I think it's probably coming. So in the absence of that, I think it is kind of incumbent upon each organization to define it for themselves. We will consider prompts to be in this category and this type of record, and therefore treated thusly. I do think you need to document it for yourself until there is industry or regulatory guidance to do it for you. That's in the US. If you are operating in Europe, we're going to get into in a second the AI Act in Europe, which does start to explain some of this kind of AI usage and how it should be governed. And I suspect that the forward-looking US states, California, Vermont, places like that, are going to follow suit with that. We'll talk about that in a second. But as far as I know, and I am not an AI regulatory expert, I haven't heard of it yet. But again, if any of you are, or you do know that, please put that into the chat.
And we've got about 10 minutes left our time for today, but we can go extended. So what I think we'll do is, if you've got a commitment at the top of the hour, please go ahead and drop off. But I think what we'll do, Sandy, if it's all right with you, is keep going, because we'll send out a recording of this webinar so that you can follow up kind of with the end of it if we do happen to go over, which we have known to do before.
Right, and we have a lot of content still to go.
Yeah, a lot of content.
So diving back in, there are generally these sort of 5 are kind of considered the core pillars of AI governance. One of the first things you're going to want to do is make an AI framework. So a framework is essentially a set of policies, procedures, considerations. It's your documentation about how you're going to live in an AI world. And we have some examples for you coming up. But these are the areas that you have to cover in your framework. You have to have ethical considerations, that's the bias, the misogyny, the racism, etc., and how you're going to be using data generally. There's obviously the legal and the regulatory compliance. We didn't talk so much on this webinar about transparency and accountability, but how you're going to be using this data, how you expect the AI to be using it, what you're going to be using it for. Again, that's a little bit like opting in, opting out. It's kind of like a junior version of that. The risk management generally is, where do you see the risks? How will you attempt to mitigate them? We could do a whole webinar just on risk mitigation, but it is at least documenting things like, where are you going to put human oversight? Where are you going to put other types of AI oversight? And this is, remember in the beginning when we said there were some AI techniques that were on kind of like the safe line and some on the less safe line. So machine learning, which is how we do auto classification at Valora, is on the safe side of that line and can be used in this way as a guardrail against generative AI. So again, we could do a whole webinar on that, but I wanted to just kind of hammer that home because you can use different forms of AI to counterbalance each other. What you don't want to use is the same form of AI to counterbalance itself, because it won't. It'll eat its tail. And then, of course, fairness and equity. Is your AI system fair? There are methods of testing that and putting hypotheticals. Did your AI equally recommend hiring the female candidate versus the male candidate with the same qualifications? That's a well-known test of your LLM. Okay, so moving ahead, let's get into making an AI governance framework. So again, I was very impressed by the University of California at San Diego. They are doing a lot of work on AI. If you go check out their websites, it's just chock full of information. And they are the ones that are kind of really actively promoting this notion of an AI governance framework. And I think that they're spot on that. In order to do that, though, you will have to have a comprehensive understanding of your enterprise data estate. So what even is that? Let's jump ahead, Jen. So your enterprise data estate is what it sounds like. It is essentially an inventory of all of your systems and all of your data. So what applications, what tools, what repositories, what search engine, what are you using as tools and systems, and what is your stuff? And to just say, I don't know, it's just some files, that is not sufficient. If you don't know what you have, of course, auto classification is the answer, as we just showed you. It's yet another kind of point for auto classification to be justified, as if you needed yet another ROI. This is it. All right, so what that sort of brings me to is the role of the information governance person in this. Because I get this question a lot of, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm basically, you know, I'm mostly a records manager. I'm mostly privacy. What do I have to do with the data? Isn't that somebody else's problem? And what I strongly recommend is that you become your organization's data guru, which is kind of the modern day analogy to what the records manager used to be back in the day of paper, which is the records manager was the only one that knew what anything was or where it lived or how to access it or when to access it. And as we became digital, that became kind of opened up to everybody, for better or for worse. And now it's just become completely overwhelming. Nobody knows what the heck they have or when they should use it or why or what to do with it. If you can become that master again of your enterprise data, it's going to put you in an incredibly powerful position. You will be the one that they go to go, how should our AI run? Which data should we run on, IG Guru? Tell us where we should aim and where we should avoid. Okay, so let's create an AI governance framework in 5 seconds or less. And the way we're going to do that is borrow other people's. And so here are 4 excellent sources of AI frameworks. In the US, the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. If you're in the EU, I highly recommend you look at the EU AI Act. Actually, everyone in this call should look at that anyway. These other organizations are industry organizations well known for the management of data, and all of them have frameworks ranging from relatively simple to unbelievably complex, covering every possible situation. I will leave that as an exercise to the viewer to pick which of these you might like, or pick and choose from all of them. But we are going to dive into the EU AI Act for a hot minute. Why? Because it is the one that is leading the way about regulation, and they've done some really, really smart things. One of the biggest things that the EU AI Act did is put together the EU AI Pact with a P. And what that is a voluntary commitment of organizations that say, yes, I solemnly swear that I will commit to accountability and transparency in the use of AI. And there are some really well-known organizations that are not particularly European in origin or in where their headquarters are, that have signed on, notably Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, generally tech leaders and hopefully responsible tech leaders that are specifically signing on to the AI Pact so that they can signal to the world that they are going to be good AI citizens. And your organizations should be doing it too. Because if you don't sign on, it's kind of like saying, yeah, I'm going to not be real responsible. Not that you would ever put that out there, but you're also not signing up. So there's something that you can take away from this webinar that you could get your organization signed up for right away. And when you do that, you will discover that there are 2 key pillars to the AI Act. One is about, again, a commitment to collaboration and networking. You will share your findings. You will learn from others. And that you will pledge to implement AI responsibly. Those are the core components of the AI Pact, which then feed the AI Act. That's about all we're going to get into today. Okay. So let's say you're ready. You're going to build your AI governance framework. Maybe you already have one or you started. I want to warn you where you're going to get pushback. Okay. And these are the 3 biggest areas, and they're not the only areas, but for sure you're going to hit this. And the first is this having to trade off innovation and regulation. And what you'll hear is go, go, go. We got AI. The time is now. Go, go, go. And you are going to need to push back on regulation and all these things that we've been talking about today, all these risks about why you don't just go, go, go. You have to be thoughtful. It's like why you learn how to drive before you put your foot on the gas pedal, because you could kill someone, including yourself. And this is effectively the same thing. The second area is, and this is well known, this is already happening, this trade-off between data privacy and security, where we need to know what we have, but we need to lock it down. Who's going to win that fight? It kind of depends where you are. In EU, data privacy is going to win. In the United States, data security is going to win. And when those butt up against each other, we don't really know the outcome yet. That is case by case at the moment as to who's really on top globally. And then we have, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, the hassle of eliminating bias. That means being real careful about your use of synthetic data and whether you're going to use it at all. While it is so alluring for all these kind of technical teams to use it because it's so cheap and easy, they don't have to even get permission. That's where you're going to get the most pushback is, well, why can't we just do this a little? Well, how is this harming anybody? That sort of thing. And you're going to have to come out there with your model collapse argument and say, that's how. All right. So how do we even measure the effectiveness of our programs? You want to set up, we've talked about all of these points already, but you want to set up measurements that actually test these things. So for transparency, Can we actually interpret these results reliably? Are they going to produce the same thing every time? Can we count on them? And if we know the truth, do we know that this is in fact accurate? For accountability, it's who is responsible? Who is considered the custodian of this? Who is the one holding the bag if the AI does XYZ PDQ? And thinking about that ahead of time of who is the steward or custodian of the results and of the actions. For bias mitigation, as I said, there are very easy tests to test against bias. And then for risk mitigation, basically implement the same type of disciplines as you would for any other risk assessment. Are you tracking incidents? Do you have third-party or vendor assessment programs? Do you have escalation protocols? You're going to need all that same stuff for AI incidents. And so this next slide, I'm not going to read this to you. We intended this.
Terrifying.
Yeah, this is the checklist for you. Not everything will apply to everybody on this call, but here you have the definitive checklist that you can go through and decide, yep, this applies to me. Yep, we need this, or no, we don't have this yet, but we need it. So this is your checklist to take home with you. And then we don't have to spend a lot of time on how not to stand up your AI readiness. You can read this one on your own. These are all the wrong things to do. I'll point out one, which is the last one on here, which is do not fail to include the information governance team, especially now that you've all been trained on all these AI risks and how to mitigate them. The worst thing you can do is say, well, this is IT and data science. We don't need any governance. That's just literally getting in the car with a blindfold on. Just don't. Okay.
Just don't.
Just don't. All right. So now we get to the last part of this presentation, already past the hour, and God bless all of you who stayed for this last bit.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, AI is coming. We understand how to control it. We're going to build our frameworks. We're going to build all our testing and our guardrails. How can we benefit from this? Well, good news. There's a lot of stuff that can use AI for information governance purposes. Remember what AI likes, things that are routine, well understood, that can tolerate some inaccuracy, that are repetitive, that require 24/7, that follow rules and structure, that are maybe time sensitive but not urgent. Yes, this is past retention, but it doesn't mean I have to hit it at the stroke of midnight. If I do it sometime in the next week, it's fine. So this is the setup, and this checklist should sound like a lot of InfoGov activities. I would say almost all of them fit this bill. And so here are a couple of good examples. So here are three. Yes, auto-classifying large volumes of data. It's a perfect setup. Hopefully we made that clear and I don't have to argue this for you yet again. Handling those requests that come in. The litigation requests, the data privacy requests, the regulatory requests, the need for reporting for some sort of compliance. These are kind of common workflows that happen over and over and over again and require historically a lot of manual effort to produce something that is relatively routine, right? So you hear that setup again. AI is going to be a great fit for something like that. Again, assuming a little bit of human oversight somewhere in the chain. And then the new one, because everybody's busy doing this, moving to the cloud, or for you guys at the law firms, matter mobility, sunsetting or moving stuff out of one system into another. And then the perpetual movement of M&A and divestitures. Whenever you have that, that's a good setup for using AI to perform some of the information governance, because there is kind of a destination, a starting point and a destination. Again, easily kind of accessible for accuracy and completeness. So that takes us near through to the end. Jen, I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah, totally. So how do you even do it and where do you even start? So those kind of steps to establish that readiness. The first thing Sandy had talked about it is audit your data estate. What do you even What do you even have out there, and understand that data estate so that you know what you're dealing with. And then that kind of balance of aligning the policies with your AI goals. So how we're going to process it, what we're going to use, what we're going to call it, and then addressing any compliance issues. So if you are in a regulatory industry, or making sure that you're aligned with other privacy or other obligations that you'll need to think of, and then automate those repetitive tasks, because that's the kind of the easy win. Use those tools to help manage the processes at a larger scale, and then have the ability to monitor and also adapt, because as things are constant, we just see in the news, things are constantly changing. So having that flexibility to be able to pivot and adapt will be huge in getting AI ready. And I'll also include this resource here. This is an AIM white paper from, it like sounds like 1,000 years ago now. It was 2024, but but it's a good read on organizational readiness for Gen AI. And it's actually the link is in this as well, as is the other link, so that you can easily access it when I send you this deck. And I want to thank you for spending, an extra 6 minutes over. We did have a lot to cover, and I appreciate everybody staying on. And I know a few people had to drop, but thanks again for sticking around. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A. And if not, here's our email addresses. You can shoot us a note after the fact. We'd be happy to get back to you then. And as mentioned, I will be sending out a link to both the recording of this webinar and to the slides, so that you can kind of use those as a resource to go back to. So I don't see any questions, but thank you so much for the comments. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad it was relevant and timely. Everyone's talking about it, and it's interesting to be in this space where we're all in information governance and data, and it's like, what about us? So it's important, as Sandy had said, to kind of get that seat around the table. So when you're developing your AI governance framework, your strategies, and certainly the tools, that you're there to inform. Awesome. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions, so why don't we wrap it at that. Again, thanks everyone for your time today, and we will see you on the next one.